Sunday evening in Cedar Park looked like every postcard version of family peace. The sun sat low behind the live oaks, turning the stucco of my parents' house the color of warm peaches. Inside the kitchen island was a parade of ordinary comforts, 5 kinds of mustard honey Dijon, whole grain yellow and spicy brown lined up like soldiers beside a platter of brisket my father had smoked since dawn. A lemon-scented candle worked overtime against the smell of onions. The dishwasher hummed. A neighbor's scooter clicked down the sidewalk outside. Ordinary, perfect, harmless, or so I kept telling myself. It was my father Robert's 60th birthday, a milestone wrapped in navy ribbons and paper plates printed with gold confetti. I had saved for months to give him a watch I knew he had always wanted, a polished Rolex resting in a velvet box I hid under a stack of napkins until the moment felt right. He deserved at least one thing that made him feel steady again. After decades in medical device sales, he had been cut from his team, and now he picked up late shifts at a hardware store brushing sawdust off his sleeves before church on Sundays. He carried that change like a quiet weight visible only in the way he lingered over price tags. Linda, my mother, ruled the evening with the same imperceptible grip she used on every holiday. Her smile was glossy, camera-ready, the kind that never met her eyes. She moved around me as if I were a chair left in the wrong place, tapping a spoon against a serving dish whenever silence felt inconvenient. "Emma, sweetheart, try not to stand in the work triangle," she said, voice sugar-dipped and edge-sharp. "Kitchens have rules." She laughed to the room as if a joke had been told. Ryan, my older brother, lifted his beer and flashed me an apologetic glance. Chloe, our sister, caught my eye and mouthed, "You okay?" I nodded. I was always okay. That was my role, the responsible one, the shock absorber. I set the table with the good plates my grandmother had given them, white with a ring of faded cornflowers. Linda monitored my spacing between fork and knife as though the wrong distance would bring down the homeowners association. The front hall, newly painted a color called cloud cover, smelled faintly of fresh latex. The walls held the same framed quotes they always had: "Family first" in block letters, and "Good daughters don't raise their voices" in swoopy script. I carried glasses of iced tea to the dining room. The air conditioner clicked on, then off again. Somewhere near the front door, a tiny blue light watched the Ring doorbell lens, its glass eye reflecting the dim hallway. If there was a first red flag that night, it was not a shout. It was the way Linda stood between me and my father as he carried the brisket to the table, turning her body into a hinge that closed the door of intimacy. "Robert," she cooed, "make a wish before you slice. Think of our family being taken care of." She held the words on that last phrase, letting them settle in the room like dust. I felt them catch in my throat. Taken care of? As if care had a single direction, as if love could be measured in how much a daughter absorbs without speaking. When we finally sat, my father cleared his throat. "To 60, he said, gentle, almost embarrassed. "To making it this far." We clinked glasses. The sound was delicate, like a promise about to break. Linda leaned back, surveying the table she had orchestrated, then turned to me with that light, dismissive laugh. "Emma, darling, I hope you're taking notes. One day, if you're lucky, you'll learn how to host without turning the kitchen into a tax spreadsheet." Ryan chuckled a little too loudly, then winced. Chloe murmured that everything looked beautiful. I slid my palms against my napkin and pretended the comment hadn't dug its fingernails into my skin. Nothing catastrophic happened. That is the trick of nights like these. The harm hides in polite places. In the middle of passing the mustard whole grain to Ryan, honey to Chloe, I felt the old choreography settle over me. I asked about church friends by name, about Linda's book club, about the neighbor's new golden retriever. My questions filled the air like weather, leaving no room for storms. My father's shoulders softened each time I steered the conversation away from money. When I set the velvet box near his plate, his hands hovered before opening it, as if afraid the gift might break. When the lid lifted and the watch gleamed, his face lit with a boyish awe I had not seen since before the layoff. "Em," he whispered, the nickname from my childhood you shouldn't have. But I had. I always had. That was the part nobody said out loud. There was the watch tonight, yes. But there were other gifts, quieter, monthly, invisible on the surface, gifts that had kept the roof above this very table. I pushed the thought down, like I pushed down the urge to stand and breathe on the back porch. I tried to just be a daughter at a birthday dinner, not a ledger walking around in a dress. Linda lifted her glass for a toast of her own. "To family doing what family should," she said, eyes on me the way a cat watches a bird. "To children who understand their responsibilities." The word landed with an extra ounce of meaning, and I felt my neck flush. Responsibility. The script written in elegant cursive on those wall plaques, the script that had my name penciled in the margins. My father kissed my cheek, gratitude honest and soft. The contrast almost undid me. The moment that should have brought relief brought something else, a thin high note inside my chest, a violin string pulled too tight. I caught Chloe watching me, her face creased with a worry she did not voice. Ryan stood to refill ice, his back stiff, the tendons in his wrist popping under the skin. Ordinary, I told myself again. Let it be ordinary. Pass the potato salad, compliment the brisket, smile at the neighbor who drops by with a bundt cake. Out in the entryway, the little blue light blinked. I did not know it then, but before the night ended, that quiet eye would capture a sentence that would change everything. A sentence I would replay when the stakes grew teeth. I will tell you that part later. For now, remember this, the worst storms often begin under clear Texas skies. The first rumble is the smallest sound, just a spoon against china, just a word stretched one syllable too long. I am Emma, 32. The daughter who wears responsibility like a cardigan you sleep in and forget to take off. By day, I am a senior financial analyst for a fintech firm in Austin. The kind of job that teaches you how numbers tell the truth even when people do not. I build budgets that breathe, models that survive worst-case scenarios, spreadsheets that warn you before the cliff. And 3 years ago, when my father's decades in medical device sales ended with a handshake and a box for his framed photo, I did what I had been trained by work by church by Linda to do. I moved money quietly where it needed to go and told no one that it was mine. The mortgage servicer's portal was plain, sterile, almost kind. I remember the first evening I logged in from my apartment. The sky over Austin, a pale lavender, and typed in routing and account numbers the way other people type love notes. I set up an automated clearinghouse transfer for the day after my parents' due date, an invisible safety net stitched just beneath their feet. $2,200 a month. I checked the box for autopay, downloaded the confirmation, and filed it under a folder I named in a way no one else would ever open: home recipes. Each month after that, the payment slipped from my account into theirs with a line that looked almost shy on the statement: payment received. No name attached, no fanfare, no trumpet of gratitude demanded. Just a quiet wire of love. If you asked why I did not tell them, I would give you a dozen practical reasons. First, my father's pride is a delicate instrument. It has kept our family dancing through layoffs and lean years with his smile intact. My mother believes that help should be invisible until she decides to acknowledge it, and even then only if acknowledging it benefits her standing with whoever is watching. The Homeowners Association sends late notices that embarrass her. The county tax office stamps dates in red that make her jaw tighten. I thought I was sparing them both. I also thought I was buying time. Time for my father to land a new role. Time for Linda to stop treating money like a mood. Time for Ryan and Chloe to step into the story without being accused of disloyalty. But there is a softer reason under all that math. I grew up in rooms where the phrase family first hung like a commandment. At potlucks and after-church coffee, women praised girls who were helpful, who were quiet, who took on tasks without asking to be seen. The messages were not written in a ledger, but they might as well have been: a good daughter covers the gap. A good daughter keeps the peace. A good daughter does not submit invoices for love. I made myself small so the room could stay large enough for everyone else. When the autopay began, I thought I was fulfilling a vow I had never spoken aloud. Still, even in loyalty, I was thorough. I created a paper trail sturdy enough to carry weight if anything cracked. I kept copies of each confirmation email, each monthly statement from the servicer, each homeowners association notice with its tiny convenience fee spelled out, each county property tax reminder with its stern language about deadlines and penalties. I photographed envelopes with postmarks and saved them in a cloud folder. I exported a spreadsheet listing 36 payments with dates and debits, the total adding up to $79,200. I told myself it was just a habit from work, a compulsion to organize. Looking back now, I think some part of me knew that love is not the only thing people misremember. Money too becomes smoke when the story needs to shift. On Sundays, I sat between my parents at church and prayed for solvency as if it were a sacrament. Robert would stand during hymns with his hand on the pew the way he used to rest it on my back when I was a child. Linda, in perfume and pearls, would bow her head and thank God for provision, then over lunch speak about the neighbor's new kitchen, as if desire had a moral shape. If I hinted at budgeting, she said budgeting was for people without faith. If I asked about property taxes, she made a joke about how numbers gave me something to mother since I did not have children. The table would laugh. I would smile because smiling is cheaper than explaining. On the nights the fear got loud, I pictured the house I grew up in as a living thing. Stucco skin, wooden bones, a heart beating behind drywall. I imagined the roof breathing easier each month when the payment hit, when the red stamp stayed away, when the homeowners association had nothing to hang over our heads. I held that image when I clicked into the portal, when my salary just covered the transfer with a little left for groceries and rent, and a therapist who reminded me that sacrifice without boundaries is not love. It is self-erasure. Dr. Nguyen asked me why my help had to be silent. I told her silence made it pure. She looked at me the way people look at a painting hung slightly crooked, compassionate, and a little sad. Every act of quiet giving changes the room a little, though. It changes what people expect, what they allow themselves to say. In the months that followed, Linda's jokes about responsibility sharpened. She spoke more often in the plural, we, as in, we deserve, we have earned, we have been through enough. I was learning that money is a language. We use it to write values we do not want to say aloud. Each payment said, you can lean. Each payment said, I will not drop you. It took me 36 to realize I had been writing a promise I could not keep forever. This part is important. The servicer's receipt line that never named me would become the hinge on which the door swung. That faceless phrase payment received would be the exact kind of ambiguity that lets a story be rewritten later, as if I were never in it at all. I did not know on that birthday night that the first person to wield that ambiguity like a weapon would be the same person who toasted to children understanding their responsibilities. I will tell you how that weapon was drawn and what I did the moment I saw the blade. But not yet. For now, remember the math because math remembers you back 2,200 times 36 equals 79,200. Quiet numbers, loud truth. The morning after the party, Cedar Park woke up in that particular Texas way bright. 2 early cicadas, loud as if the sun had a volume knob someone had cranked. I drove over to return a serving platter Linda insisted I bring home for leftovers, an alibi she liked because it meant I would tidy her kitchen one more time. The stucco wall along the walk had a hairline crack thin as a paper cut, running from the corner of the window down to the hose reel. Harmless, I told myself. Houses settle. Then I remembered how often I used that sentence about people. Families settle too. The front door opened before I could knock. Linda's smile was already set. Emma, she sang, take a look at those knives. They dull so quickly. You know what to do. In the kitchen, the air held that next day scent of cooled brisket and sugar crust. Robert stood at the counter in his hardware store, polo hands wrapped around a coffee mug like it could warm more than his fingers. Linda's voice floated in from the hall lower now that she assumed I was part of the house again. We will have to juggle the cards, she said, the words clipped businesslike. The property tax bill will land in the next 2 weeks, and I am not calling Margaret from church to borrow again. That woman wears judgment like pearls. Robert sighed into his mug. I can pick up extra hours this weekend, he said. The manager said if I cover the loading dock, we get a small differential. He said small like it might be enough to move mountains and embarrassment, like a second ingredient mixed into the sentence. I stood just inside the doorway at the invisible line where you can still pretend you did not hear. Linda kept going. The cards are near their ceilings. That home store card is maxed. The travel card well points are only useful if we travel, and we are not traveling. Unless you count trips to the grocery store, which frankly feel exotic these days. She laughed to herself. If Emma had any sense, she would understand that family must be taken care of. Her job is numbers. What are numbers for, if not for this? There it was again, taken care of. This time it did not sound like love. It sounded like a job description someone else had written and stapled to my life. I stepped fully into the room and set the platter by the sink. Morning, I said, like my heart was not ratcheting tighter. Do you need help with the trash? Linda turned, eyebrows lifting in a slow arc that labeled me an interruption. We are fine, she said, which in our language meant, you may stand here and be convenient. She breezed past me to the mail rack, fingered a stack of envelopes, and pulled out one with a green stripe. The Homeowners Association. I recognized the font without seeing the words. She slid the notice under the cookbook on the counter, as if paper can be tamed by proximity to recipes. A corner stuck out showing the word past. My knuckles cooled. Mom, I said softly, do you need me to look at anything? She smiled without warmth. Emma, darling, not everything is a spreadsheet. Some of us prefer to live in the world, not in a cell with a formula. Besides, Ryan and Chloe will come by later. We will discuss family matters. She angled the phrase toward me like a door closing. On the drive home, I felt that stucco crack in my chest widen a whisper. Looking back now, I can pinpoint the exact second suspicion stopped being a fog and condensed into a bead of water I could balance on my fingertip. It was when Linda said family matters in the tone you might use for an executive session, and she did not mean all of us. She meant a quorum that excluded the person making the payments. The convenience of my silence had turned into a structure they could stand on and call a balcony. I pulled into my apartment lot and did what I do when panic tries to get loud. I opened a new tab and began to chase facts. I looked up the county tax calendar again, tracing the deadlines like a finger over braille. I reviewed the latest Homeowners Association statement in my cloud folder and noticed a line I had missed in my original filing. A convenience fee under $10 for online processing dated the same afternoon as a church committee meeting Linda never misses. That timestamp clicked into place with something I had heard over a bunt cake years ago, Linda bragging that she never pays late fees because she knows how to charm clerks into removing them. The fee still there told another story. Either the charm had failed or she had not tried. Memory is a picky editor. It cuts what is messy and keeps what fits the plot. Mine started unspooling little moments I had not assigned meaning to at the time. Linda forgetting to bring the mail in for a week so bills would conveniently arrive in a stack that made her the victim. The day she tore a credit card offer in half in front of me, declaring she was above debt culture, then asked me 2 hours later whether balance transfers had grace periods. The time she told a friend from church that her children refused to help with basic obligations, while I sat beside her with a bank app open on my phone waiting for a transfer to clear. I wrote 3 questions in my notebook. Ink makes a thing real. 1. If the Homeowners Association fee timestamp matches the church meeting, who paid it and why? Then 2. If the property tax deadline is in 2 weeks, what plan exists besides my autopay? 3. If there is no plan, who will Linda decide is responsible when the red stamp arrives? The answers were not complicated. They were bones you could feel with your fingers if you pressed into the skin of the day. That afternoon, Ryan texted a photo of a broken hinge on the backyard gate with the caption, "You know a person." He meant, do you know a handyman who will do it cheap, and also, will you cover it? I stared at the image at the way the metal had pulled free from the wood screws stripped to silver circles. Houses settle and then they split. You either fix it, or the gap widens. I told him to call the number on the sticker in the garage. I did not offer to pay. His reply was a thumbs up that felt like a test I had failed. By evening, I had reprinted the last 6 months of statements and slid them into a binder with tabbed dividers, Mortgage Homeowners Association, county tax credit cards. I labeled the spine with the month and the year as if I were filing for audit. I was. Not theirs, mine. Not to justify what I did, but to remind myself that I was not imagining the math. Numbers remember us when we forget ourselves. Before bed, I scrolled through the Ring app not to watch but to check storage. The clip list showed dozens of innocuous doorbell alerts, delivery drivers, neighbors, a stray cat. The night before, around the time toasts were happening, there was a motion event flagged by the algorithm as person. I did not press play. Not yet. Suspicion is a muscle. Once it wakes, it will keep you up. I closed the app, placed my phone face down, and told myself one last time that families settle. The crack runs along the wall, you patch it, you paint, you pretend the line was always part of the design. But I had measured enough lines to know when one is growing. That is how the next part began, with a decision so small it barely made a sound I would stop smoothing. Preparation. When you do it right, feels like kindness to your future self. That morning, the world looked ordinary enough to trick anyone who was not paying attention. A lawn crew rattled down the street outside my apartment, the scent of cut grass floating in with the sun. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and turned suspicion into assignments. First, I pulled the binder from last night onto the table and built it out like a spine that could actually hold the weight I knew was coming. I added a cover sheet with dates spelled clearly. Sunday, April 12th, my father's 60th birthday. Monday, April 13th, overheard a conversation in the kitchen. 2 weeks until the county's property tax deadline. I printed the most recent Homeowners Association statement again, then circled the small online processing fee dated the very afternoon Linda had been at her church committee. I wrote in the margin, "This timestamp matters." I did not yet know how only that it would. Next, I logged into the mortgage servicer's portal. I had memorized the layout the way you memorize a childhood neighborhood. The account number like a street name, the tabs like familiar stop signs. I downloaded the full payment history for the past 3 years every month, a simple line that said, "Payment received," and beside each line I wrote in pen the words from my bank that told the other side of the story. Money left me here. It arrived here. On a separate sheet, I totaled the transfers again. 36 payments at $2,200 equal to $79,200. Then I printed the servicer's generic confirmation language in its own packet and highlighted a paragraph that would later make me ache. Due to privacy protocols, payer identity may not appear on homeowner statements. In plain English, I was invisible by design. I moved on to the county tax site, clicking through their explanations of delinquency and penalties. I did not need to quote laws to understand the gravity. I only needed to imagine a red stamp landing on an envelope in my parents' mailbox and the way Linda would hold that envelope like a prop in a play where she was both the victim and the director. I printed their simple timeline anyway and tucked it into a tab labeled Property Taxes. On a yellow sticky note, I wrote Short Runway. That was all I needed to remember. Then I opened the Ring app. The clip list blinked its rows of gray thumbnails. I scrolled to the time that aligned with the moment after the cake had been cut, when people gathered by the door with leftovers and goodbyes. I pressed play. The video showed my mother walking me to the threshold, her hand resting lightly on my arm, the way you hold a guest, not a daughter. The audio caught the murmur of voices inside then. Linda's quiet and precise, the sentence shaped like a finality I felt in my bones. Get out and never come back. I watched myself exhale, almost invisible, then step onto the porch. The door clicked shut. I saved the clip in 3 places, exported a transcript, and titled the file with the full date and time. I did not watch it again, not then, but I carried the knowledge of it the way you carry a matchbook in your pocket, aware of the heat that might be needed later. I called my friend Callie and kept the conversation short. I need a neutral ear, I said. She listened as I outlined the binder, the clip, the taxes, the fee. The way Linda used the phrase family matters like a velvet rope. Callie has a gift for naming the thing without making you defensive. You are the emergency fund no one acknowledges, she said, and I could hear the sadness in her voice. Emergency funds cannot be endless. She offered her sofa if I needed it, and I made a small note in my calendar to drop off a spare set of clothes at her place, not because I planned to use them, but because planning is how I breathe. The last call I made that afternoon was to Dr. Nguyen. In session, she asked me to stand, plant my feet, and try aloud the words my mouth kept rejecting. No is a complete sentence, she said, and the way she held the room steady let me borrow the steadiness for myself. We rehearsed phrases I could carry into a storm without shouting. I will not discuss this if we cannot remain respectful. I am not available for financial rescue. This does not make me disloyal, it makes me honest. It felt theatrical at first, like reading lines. But there was a point as the words came out in a voice I could recognize as mine, when the rehearsal turned into a rehearsal dinner before a marriage to a new way of being. Boundaries are vows we make to ourselves. After therapy, I went home and drafted a single email to myself with the subject line, "If you need proof." Inside, I listed the locations of every file, named the people who had heard certain sentences, and summarized the timeline in clean, unambiguous terms. I attached the Ring transcript and the mortgage packet. I also typed the smallest decision of the day, the decision that would look cruel to anyone addicted to my silence. If confronted with contempt, I would present facts once and leave. Not argue, not bargain, not lift the weight back onto my shoulders. Present, then leave. Before I closed the binder, I slid a blank page into the front pocket. Across the top, I wrote 3 questions I would ask out loud when the time came, questions that leave very little room for denial to hide. 1. Who do you believe has been making your house payments? 2. When did you decide it was my obligation? 3. What changes for you now that I am done? Underneath, in smaller letters that only I would see when the page tilted into light, I added, "This is very important, not for them, for me." There was one more breadcrumb to set. I printed a small, neat checklist labeled day after week after 3 weeks after. On the first line under day after, I wrote breathe. On the second, I wrote pack go bag and then listed calm things: toothbrush, charger, duplicate keys, a copy of my lease. On the third, I wrote cancel autopay if needed, and beside it a date column. I left blank. Not a threat, not a promise. A boundary with a space waiting for ink. Looking back now, the funny thing is how gentle that day felt compared to what came next. It was only paper and ink lines drawn with a steady pen. Yet each line was a quiet blade. Not to cut anyone else down, to cut myself free. I will tell you how I used it soon. For now, file away this truth. Preparation is not paranoia when the house is already cracking. It is care. And care, when it includes you, changes everything. Back in the kitchen, sunlight slid across the granite as I laid my voice down like a clean blade. I have been paying your mortgage for 3 years, 2,200 each month, a total of 79,200. Robert went still. Linda smiled the way a judge smiles before announcing a sentence and said, "Get out and never come back." The spoon hit tile, the Rolex caught the light, and the house I had carried on my back felt suddenly weightless without me. I picked up my bag, walked past the blue eye of the doorbell, and chose silence over pleading. Outside, the Texas air was warm and merciless. I decided I would never fund contempt again. That night, I ended the autopay with 3 calm steps written notice to the servicer, a time-stamped call log, and a certified letter confirming termination. I set credit alerts, archived the ring clip in 3 safe places, and made a binder index any attorney would envy. I wrote a single rule in my notebook: present facts once and leave. My go bag waited by the door like a boundary turned into canvas and zippers. No speeches, no second chances, no more secret subsidies. Quiet revenge is not fire. It is a thermostat turned down to exactly what I need. 3 weeks later, on a Friday morning, Robert called with panic rasping in his throat. A delinquency notice, a timeline that could start foreclosure in roughly 30 days. I listened without rescuing and agreed to 1 meeting at Kirby Lane, him alone. I printed the payment history, the property tax calendar, and the homeowners association fee with the tiny convenience charge that proved when and how bills were handled. Dr. Nguyen and I rehearsed the same steady sentences until they felt like a spine. I packed the binder, the ring transcript, and a pen that did not shake. I slept. At a window table, pancakes steaming, I slid the binder across and said the truest sentence I own: I am done paying. I asked my 3 questions. Who did you think kept this roof up? When did you decide it was my obligation? What changes now that I am finished? And let the quiet stretch. Robert asked for 2 more months. I told him no, not unkindly, just final. I pointed to the servicer receipts, the spelled-out totals, the way privacy protocols had erased my name from their view. The power in the room tilted without a sound. I stood to leave lighter than I had felt in years. Linda pushed through the door in perfume and fury, calling me ungrateful, loud enough to turn heads, promising the church and the neighborhood would know who I really was. I did not argue. I pressed play. Her own voice from the ring, "Get out and never come back," filled the space and emptied the performance. I added the 36 payments, the 79,200, and the cancellation confirmation, then closed the binder like a gavel. My parting line was quiet and irreversible. From today, no one spends me to keep themselves warm. I left them with the bill and the truth. Fallout arrived: fast missed calls, stacking messages veering from guilt to threats, and a group chat at church whispering about the clip. The real estate office paused Linda's interview, citing concerns about discretion. Robert sold the Rolex to buy breathing room that arithmetic could not provide. Ryan and Chloe reviewed the evidence folder I shared and stopped carrying Linda's story. They told our parents to tell the truth. The homeowners association posted another notice, this time with fines spelled out in plain English. The house that had floated on my silence began to sink into math. I did nothing except hold the line. I signed a sunny apartment in Muller, paid 6 months up front, and filled it with quiet things that belonged only to me: plants, soft towels, a calendar with my name on it. Therapy moved from triage to rebuilding. I ran around the lake at dawn and learned what my voice sounds like when it does not apologize. Robert found part-time work with a smaller medical supply company. He speaks softer now, as if relief and regret share a room. Linda attends church less and speaks in shorter sentences when she does. The binder lives on a shelf I rarely touch. Peace, I learned, is not free. It costs exactly what you have been giving away. On a quiet Sunday, 6 months after that birthday, I brewed coffee and wrote down the dates that changed me. Sunday, April 12th, the toast and the sentence. Friday, May 3rd, the reversal and the calls. I do not replay the ring clip anymore. I do not need proof to believe myself. If you are listening on a couch in any American town, counting the ways your love has been turned into an obligation, hear me, gather your records, practice your no, and choose the door that leads back to you. Family first does not mean you last forever. When I finally stepped outside, the sky was still Texas blue, only this time it belonged to me.